Welcome to Conversations Beyond Borders. I'm Laura, a mindset coach and your guide through the fascinating, sometimes challenging, but always transformative world of midlife. This podcast is for women just like you, women who are growing, questioning what's next, redefining their identities, and stepping into a new chapter with courage and curiosity.
And I'm Susan. Whether it's an empty nest, a career shift, or just that feeling of what now, midlife brings many questions, but it also offers incredible opportunities for growth and discovery. We're here to explore it with real stories, expert insights, and honest conversations about what it truly means to navigate this time of life.
In each episode, we'll explore a midlife challenge, whether it's making time for ourselves, stepping into new passions, or letting go of past expectations. We're tackling it all.
And the best part, you're not alone in this. You'll hear from women on the same journey, and we'll uncover the lessons, the laughter, and the aha moments that come with embracing midlife as a fresh beginning.
So whether you're feeling stuck or inspired, unsure, or ready to leap on in, Conversations Beyond Borders is here for you. This is a safe space to dream bigger, dig deeper, and connect with women who are also ready to live boldly beyond the borders of what they once believed possible.
Take a deep breath, find a quiet moment for yourself, and tune in as we navigate midlife together, sharing honest and meaningful conversations.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Conversations Beyond Borders. I'm Laura.
And I'm Susan. We're so glad you're here with us today. If you've ever found yourself staring at the ceiling late at night wondering, is this all there is? You're not alone. Midlife can bring some serious emotional weight. For many women, it's a season of transition that feels overwhelming and uncertain. Today, we're diving into something we often hear about from women, that deep emptiness or the void that can creep in when the roles and identities you've carried for so long start to shift. Maybe the kids have grown. Maybe your career isn't fulfilling you as it used to, or the spark in your relationship feels dim. It can leave you questioning, who am I? What's next for me? If any of this resonates with you, stick with us, because today we're exploring where this feeling comes from and how you can start to fill that space with something meaningful that truly reflects you.
Exactly. This void starts to show itself when the kids leave. It's not just about an empty house. It's about a shift in our identity, those routines that suddenly vanish, and a silence that can feel very uncomfortable, leave you wandering through a home that feels strangely different. This can stir up emotions we didn't expect, making us feel disconnected from ourselves, like we've lost our reason for being, our very sense of purpose. It's like your identity left with the kids.
You're so right, Laura. And what we're going to talk about today is this emotional void that so many midlife women experience, which can appear, quite frankly, in many different ways. For some, it's a nagging sense of restlessness. For others, it's a deep exhaustion that comes from constantly striving, but never quite satisfied. One of the biggest culprits, perfectionism. Brené Brown talks about this in her book, Atlas of the Heart, how perfectionism isn't the same as striving for excellence or self-improvement. Instead, it's a defense mechanism. It's the belief that if we look perfect, act perfectly, and somehow manage to avoid mistakes, we'll avoid shame, judgment, or failure. But in reality, perfectionism doesn't protect us. It isolates us. It keeps us trapped in people-pleasing patterns, over-functioning for others while neglecting ourselves. And ultimately, it leaves us feeling resentful, drained, and deeply disconnected from who we are. And for so many midlife women, this pressure to be everything to everyone, to be the perfect mother, partner, friend, colleague, only amplifies that feeling of emptiness. Because when our self-worth is tied to an external validation, what happens when the kids don't need us in the same way? When the career doesn't feel fulfilling anymore? When we finally take a breath and realize we don't even know what we want anymore? That's what we're unpacking today. How this emotional void forms, how perfectionism fuels it, and most importantly, how we can begin to break free and reconnect with ourselves.
And here's the thing, it's not just about feeling empty. It's a deep longing for something more, something that brings you back to your authentic self. The truth is, once the kids leave and you feel your role shift, you may start to feel a bit uncomfortable in your own skin because for so long your identity was wrapped up in being a hands on parent. When you're busy raising kids, there are plenty of distractions, so it's easy to miss how far you've drifted from your authentic self. Now, I'm not saying you don't love your family or that you regret that time of your life. I will be the first to tell you. Having my kids at home and being a hands on parent were my favorite years.
I absolutely echo that, Laura. Me too.
This is about realizing that somewhere along the line, you put yourself on the back burner. Your identity became so wrapped up in being a mom and managing everything for everyone else that now, without that role front and center, you're left wondering, who am I outside of this role? This role I've been in for a better part of 20 years. But this isn't just a wake up call, it's also an opportunity.
Yeah, an opportunity to reconnect with yourself, to rediscover what excites you, what fulfills you, and what you want this next chapter to look like. In stage 2, breaking free, overcoming negative thought patterns, many women feel like they're just not enough. We get trapped in a cycle of meeting everyone else's needs while losing sight of our own, believing that if we do more, we'll finally feel worthy. But instead, we end up exhausted, disconnected, and stuck in self-doubt. Breaking free means challenging these thoughts, recognizing that saying no isn't selfish, that rest isn't laziness, and that our worth isn't tied to how much we give. It's about shifting from guilt to self-trust, allowing ourselves to ask, what do I need? And honoring the answer without shame.
Right? And isn't it just so subtle? It starts with that feeling of wanting to be perfect and being everything for everyone. And you're afraid if you stop, even for a second, everything you work so hard to hold up will fall apart.
Oh, I agree, Laura. And you know what? That's when the resentment starts creeping in. It's like you've been giving and giving and giving. But where's my support? Where's the gratitude? When is it time for someone to care for me?
It's like the more capable you are, the more they ask of you. You deserve a trophy, or at least a few hours of peace, but instead you get more, can you just?
Can you just? The problem is we don't often admit to ourselves that we're resentful. We even think that's selfish to feel that way. So what do? We bury it. But it's there, and it feeds into this emptiness that Laura and I have been talking about, the longing for something that feels real.
And then there's imposter syndrome. You're showing up in all the right ways, but underneath you're thinking, what if I'm not good enough to take this next step? What if I fail? Who am I to think I can create something new for myself? And that's a big part of why this feeling of emptiness or the void feels so hard to shake. It's a mix of self-doubt and that fear of wanting more.
You're right. It's like this inner battle between wanting more, freedom, peace, or just the space to breathe, and feeling guilty for even thinking that way. And there's so much shame tied to all of this, which makes it pretty tricky. You're feeling like you're doing enough, even though you're doing everything. It's like, well, you're up at dawn, packing lunches, ensuring everyone has what they need, managing the household schedules, checking in on the aging parents. You remember the doctor's appointments, planning the family vacations, coordinating school events, and ensuring there's a homemade meal on the table, because somehow that's still the gold standard for good motherhood. And then of outside the house, you're juggling deadlines, managing team snacks and transportation. Oh, Laura, and for me, surely becoming the PTO president would have given me the validation I sought.
Oh my gosh, I am exhausted just hearing you list all of that.
Yeah, here's the thing. No one sees the exhaustion that builds up from being everything to everyone. Society tells you that you should be grateful. You should be happy because you have a career, the family, the life you work so hard for. What if you're not grateful? What if deep down you feel like something is missing? What if you crave something different but are scared to admit it, even to yourself, let alone to anyone else? That's where the shame kicks in because saying I want more feels selfish. Saying I don't feel fulfilled feels ungrateful. So you keep pushing through, hoping the feeling will pass. But it doesn't. It just builds. And that's what we're here to discuss today. Laura, how do we break out of this cycle? How do we permit ourselves to want something different without the guilt? And most importantly, how do we start filling that emotional void in a way that feeds us instead of just draining us further?
Unfortunately, the feeling that comes with this stage have the power to hold us back from taking that first step towards reconnecting with our authentic self and from truly being vulnerable with ourselves and others. This is the point where many women start to realize that something has to change, but change is scary. It's the unknown. It's letting go of the old ways of being, and that feels like you're not only letting go of the roles you've held for so long, but it feels like you're letting go of you, and that is incredibly unsettling.
Oh, the very worst.
Exactly. You're standing at the edge of who you've always been, unsure of who you'll be without those roles that have defined you for so many years.
And this is where the shift happens. Hopefully, if you're ready for it, we do start asking ourselves tough questions. What do I really want? Who am I outside of all these labels and expectations? What happens if I stop trying to please everyone else and actually show up for myself?
Right? This is where we need to step out of ego, ignore the assumed societal expectations, and take the heaviness of those emotions as an invitation.
Yeah, an invitation is more than just a request to show up somewhere. It's an opportunity to step into something new.
Exactly. An invitation to push through the doubt and reclaim your voice, to stop living in the shadows of what others expect and start stepping into the light of who you were created to be.
So, as you listen today, take a moment to reflect. How have your roles and responsibilities been shaped over the years? And now, as you begin to step into a new chapter, what does it feel like to consider who you are outside of those roles? What might it look like to reconnect with your authentic self without the weight of societal expectations? Welcome back. If you've been following along, you know we're diving into the real emotional struggles in stage 2. And today, we're tackling a big one.
Ooh, say more.
Yeah, learning to say no to what drains us and yes to what truly serves us.
And let's be honest, this isn't going to be easy. So many of us have spent years putting others first, whether it's our kids, partners, aging parents, or our careers. So when we finally start thinking of our own needs, emotions like self-doubt, inadequacy, and uncertainty come rushing in.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with self-guilt, probably one of the most complicated emotions to shake. It's that inner voice whispering, you should be doing more. We feel guilty for saying no to extra work even when our plate is overflowing. We feel guilty for needing rest as if exhaustion is required to be a good mother, partner, or professional. We feel guilty for setting a boundary, worried that prioritizing ourselves means disappointing someone else. But here's the thing, Laura, guilt isn't proof that you're doing something wrong. It's proof that you're doing something different. Different doesn't mean bad. It just means new. It means you're stepping outside of the patterns that have overextended you for so long. It means you're starting to recognize that your worth isn't measured by how much you sacrifice for others. Think about it. If you've spent years saying yes to everything, always putting others first, and suddenly you start asserting your needs, it's going to feel uncomfortable. Of course, guilt is going to show up, but that's just your brain reacting to change. Guilt isn't a stop sign. It's just a sign that you're moving beyond old habits. And if you can sit with that discomfort instead of letting it pull you back, you'll start to see that setting boundaries, prioritizing rest, and choosing yourself aren't acts of selfishness. They are acts of self-respect.
Exactly. And new can feel uncomfortable. It challenges the roles and the routines we've lived in for so long. We're used to being the reliable one, the caretaker, the problem solver. So when we shift away from that, even just a little bit, it can feel like we're breaking some unspoken rule. But that discomfort isn't a sign to stop, it's a sign that you're growing.
Yeah, I love that saying, Laura, that says, just water and bloom where you're planted.
I love that saying, but I have to admit, that hasn't always come natural to me. I've had to work
Mm.
very hard to stop myself from trying to be the fixer in my children's lives. I remember when I realized I needed to stop being that fixer. It actually took very conscientious effort, and I had to constantly remind myself they don't need me to fix anything, they just want me to listen. I found it quite remarkable how much effort it actually took for me to hold back from that instinct to jump in with solutions. I had to sit in my discomfort of not offering advice, not trying to make things easier for them. But over time, I realized that my presence, just listening without trying to fix, is what they truly needed. And in letting go of that need to solve everything, I not only gave them space to grow, but I also started to redefine my own role in their lives.
Wow, that's such a significant shift. Unfortunately, I'm going to mention another thing that we struggle with as midlife women, and that's insecurity. The fear that if we say no, people will think less of us. We'll be seen as selfish or unhelpful or unreliable if we set a boundary. It's that lingering worry that our value is tied to how much we give, how much we say yes, and how much we accommodate the needs of others. But let me ask you this. When someone you respect sets a boundary, do you suddenly think less of them? Do you assume they're selfish or that they don't care? Of course you don't. In fact, we tend to admire people who know their limits, communicate their needs clearly, and stand firm in their decisions. We respect them because they're demonstrating confidence, self-awareness, and balance. So, Laura, why don't we extend that same grace to ourselves? Why do we believe that our worth is conditional? That if we stop overextending ourselves, people will stop valuing us? The truth is that insecurity thrives on the fear of rejection, but real connection isn't built on overfunctioning or people-pleasing. It's built on authenticity, honesty, and mutual respect. Setting boundaries doesn't push people away, it strengthens relationships by making them more accurate, sustainable, and balanced. And the more we practice this, the more we realize that the people who truly value us, they don't disappear just because we're starting to value ourselves.
Exactly. It's that feeling deep down so many of us struggle with, like we have to prove our worth by always being available, always saying yes. That nagging thought of, am I even allowed to say no? Am I letting someone down creeps in, making us question ourselves. We tell ourselves that a good mom, daughter, friend, or employee should be able to handle all the things, but that is just not true.
I agree. That is society's voice just rearing its ugly head again.
Oh my gosh, societal expectations. Saying no doesn't mean we're failing. It means we're choosing where our energy goes. I want to say that again. Saying no doesn't mean we're failing. It means we're choosing where our energy goes.
It's an intentional decision.
Exactly. Setting boundaries is self care. And the truth is, our worth isn't measured by how much we give at the expense of ourselves. Just like we respect others for honoring their limits, we deserve to respect our own.
Yeah, and be careful of that uncertainty. Saying yes is often easier because it's familiar. We know what to expect when we overextend ourselves, but choosing ourselves, that can feel like stepping into unknown territory. What happens if we prioritize our well being? What happens if we don't always put others first? That uncertainty can feel scary, but it's also where the growth happens.
Right? Because we step beyond what's comfortable. It's in those cringy moments of uncertainty when we choose ourselves despite our fear that we start to redefine who we are. Think about it. When we spent so many years basing our worth on what we do for others, it's no surprise that prioritizing ourselves feels a little bit uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely.
But that discomfort isn't to be feared, it needs to be embraced. It's a sign that something new is unfolding. It's the space where we learn that our value isn't in as much as we give, but in who we are. And that's where the real transformation begins.
Oh my goodness, let me tell you a story about feeling fearful when I tried something new.
Oh, do tell.
I decided I was going to join the pickleball craze and tried a drop in time at our community center. I got to tell you, for weeks, I had to tell myself, don't turn around. Each time, I was filled with so much insecurity and concern about how am I going to measure up with the others? What would they think of me? And even more scary, what if I failed? I had so much self doubt. The voice that whispers, are you sure you can do this? That doubt can be paralyzing. What I want you to hear is that I persisted, and pickleball has become one of my favorite activities. I can't say I'm cured of self doubt, but every time I leave, I remind myself that fear could have had me running the other way, but I would have missed out. I would have missed out on some great exercise, but even more importantly, creating some new skills and making new friends. We are allowed to take up space in our own life. You're allowed to make those choices that honor you.
Susan, good for you. I love that you are able to push beyond the self doubt and you found this new passion. Keep in mind that self doubt is not proof that you're making the wrong choice. It's proof that you're stepping into something new. Of course, it's going to feel unfamiliar and maybe a little bit cringy. You're rewriting patterns that have been in place for years. Taking up space in your own life doesn't diminish your role in anyone else's, it strengthens it. Imagine how good it would feel to give with a full and happy heart instead of giving from a place of exhaustion. When you show up for yourself, you show up more fully for the people who matter the most.
Wow, Laura, that is such a powerful shift. So as we close this segment, we want to leave you with this. What's one small way you can say yes to yourself this week? Maybe it's declining an obligation that doesn't serve you or permitting yourself to rest. Whatever it is, know that it is valid and you deserve it.
So, Susan, does that mean I can take the next week off and binge watch the latest season of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills?
Well, I'm writing your excuse note as we speak.
Thank you. And if you're struggling with any of this, we want to hear from you. What emotions come up for you when you say no? Have you incorporated any strategies that help you through them? If you're comfortable, share your thoughts on our private Facebook group. What you share may be helpful for someone else. Let's support each other through this, or share your favorite binge-worthy show. We would love to get to know our audience, including the guilty pleasures.
Absolutely. In our next episode, we'll dig even deeper into how we shift from fear to freedom what it takes to trust ourselves in midlife, to let go of the patterns that have kept us stuck, and to step into a life that feels more like your own. We'll talk about the practical ways to rebuild self-trust, quiet that inner critic, and start choosing from a place of confidence rather than fear. But for now, remember this. Every time you choose yourself, you rewrite the story of what's possible. Every time you say no to something that drains you and yes to something that lights you up, you are shifting the narrative. You show yourself and the world that your well-being matters whenever you honor your needs, set a boundary, or permit yourself to rest. This isn't about radical overnight change, my friend. It's about small, intentional choices that over time create a life that's filled more aligned, more fulfilling, and more you. And that starts with trusting that you are worthy of that life, because you are. Remember, every time you choose yourself, you are rewriting the story of what's possible.
The journey may not always be easy,
but we promise you,
it'll be worth it. In this episode, we explored the emotional challenges of saying no to others and yes to ourselves, launching us into navigating feelings of inadequacy, insecurity, uncertainty, and self-doubt. We discussed how setting boundaries isn't selfish, but instead about honoring our own needs, reclaiming our energy, and stepping into a more empowered and fulfilling way of living.
Yes, and to close, we encourage you to take one small step this week, because change doesn't have to be overwhelming. It does start with a single decision, a moment of choosing. Whatever that small step looks like for you, it matters. Whenever you choose to honor your needs, set a boundary, or permit yourself to step back from overextending, you reinforce a new narrative, one where your well-being, happiness, and fulfillment are just as important as everyone else's. Because true growth and empowerment don't come from doing more, they come from choosing better. And every small step in that direction is a step towards a more intentional, authentic, and fulfilling life.
Be sure to join us next week as we take the emotions we explored today and dive into practical ways to move through them with confidence and clarity.
We'll identify practical ways to overcome these challenges and highlight and discuss the key ways to achieve the milestones of Stage 2, where self-assertion and personal empowerment take center stage. If you've ever struggled to advocate for your own needs without second-guessing yourself, this episode is for you.
Now, here is some of the legal stuff. The information shared on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered professional health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. We are not licensed mental health professionals, and the content of this podcast is not intended to replace care from a qualified mental health provider. If you are experiencing distress, facing challenges in your mental health, or require professional support, we strongly encourage you to seek help from a licensed healthcare professional. If you are in crisis and need immediate support, you can contact the Suicide Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988 or texting 988. Trained crisis counselors are available 24/7 to offer free and confidential support. This podcast is designed to inspire and support women navigating midlife transitions, but your journey is unique, and professional guidance can make a significant difference.